with partnerships in esports effectively serving as the lifeblood, keeping things going for the most part. Well, at least that's my view. I thought it'd be worthwhile drafting in someone who works in that day to day, an expert in that subject matter, so to speak. I've drafted EXCEL's partnership manager, John Bedford, to discuss this with me. Obviously, it's a vital part of the industry, which we'll get into exactly why. So it's worth delving into this entirely. And then towards the end, we'll also look at how to kind of get into this line of work, because as far as I can tell, there's not a direct pipeline. It's not like you go get a partnerships degree from a university and there you go. So firstly, mate, thank you very much for joining me and taking the time on this particularly hot day in the UK.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me. Expert, I think you call me, Adam. What a treat.
Yeah, I don't like using that word normally, to be fair. But
when you've got to use it, you've got to use it.
Exactly, mate. Real recognises real and all that, like, you know. But how much were you dreading sitting down and talk to me during this heat? Well, first off, dreading sitting down talking to me, and secondly, in this heat.
I was going to say, yeah, I've got a leather seat, so I'm not having a great time at the moment.
Oh, Jesus.
But no, it's been a pleasure. I think that it's partnerships is a big part of esports. I think everybody acknowledges that, and certainly people in the industry acknowledge that. So we're lucky to be in the space, and I think we get a lot of creative freedom that people in partnerships don't necessarily get elsewhere. So good to have a chat, and I think you guys do good stuff, and good to give a bit of insight to people who might be looking at partnerships as a route for them, and yeah, discuss that in a bit more detail.
Awesome stuff. So yeah, if anyone sees us looking particularly sweaty during this episode, then yeah, it's like probably 300 degrees right now or something. Or at least that's how it feels. But like when I was doing a cursory LinkedIn check before, like it doesn't seem like you've been in esports for decades, like some other people. So like, why did you decide to come into this wonderful, beautiful, cursed industry?
Yeah, I think so. I've always been a gamer of sorts. I spent a fair amount of my summer holidays and most of my time off playing games. I look back at some of the like lengths I would go to play games as a kid and just go like, that is ridiculous. I wish I had the time to go to such ridiculous lengths now. But it is what it is. So I worked realistically in traditional sport and events prior to joining EXCEL. But being a gamer, and I think seeing the strengths and weaknesses of the partnership and sponsorship industry in other industries, like football, rugby, Formula One, esports is a huge opportunity, not only professionally to work in, but also for brands coming into the space. Speaking generally about the way that esports teams work, you know, we have most of our revenue comes from partnerships. You look at football, for example, they have match day, they have hospitality and corporate stuff like that. They're selling loads and loads of merch, which some esports teams do in serious, like, you know, difference making quantities, but realistically most teams aren't selling crazy amounts of merch. And then everything that comes alongside that. So the opportunity to work in partnerships in esports is definitely there. Teams need to make money. But also for brands, the creative control that we're able to implement with our brand partners is probably second to none, I would say, when it comes to sport. It's not a case of, you know, here's a box at the stadium and here's some signed jerseys and we'll slap your logo there. We get to do some really creative things because of the industry that we're in. I think in the last year, you can look at Web3 and the metaverse and the way that gaming is kind of blurring that together. Brands in some cases look at Web3 and gaming as all the same sort of thing. So that's becoming a new area that teams, rightly or wrongly, are exploring. But yeah, big creative opportunity. I think as a gamer, it makes sense. And I've got like bang into it. I wasn't watching the LEC before I joined EXCEL, and but you know, you get right into it when it's, you know, it's your team, and I see where the passions come from for sure.
Maybe that's why my passion runs dry now, because like I've had to stay impartial all of my time in esports, you know. And like, admittedly, back in the day, I was an optic fan, one of the toxic optic fans probably, because I was like a COD kid, and I was like, it was competitive sniping before like the competitive as we know it now, and I was like, I got to play with Hex and all these optic people who were like in my mind, some of the first internet celebrities, you know, and that was my pipeline. And then you start to work in the industry, especially as a journalist, it's like, okay, I can't be having favourites here. And then, unfortunately, I took a turn and thought, well, everyone's awful. That's the pipeline there. But as I'm always curious with people that come from sports into esports, like how do you like discover the opportunity at Excel?
Well, I think it's, naturally the job title, using things like LinkedIn specifically, and Hitmarker are the sort of two key spaces
Woo.
that I use. There we go. I think it doesn't take a lot of work to go, right, this is the job title that I think I need. Partnerships, business development, whatever it may be. Partnership sort of splits itself in two. You've got your business development people, and you've got your account managers who look after your existing partners. And some teams will blur those lines, and some keep it completely separate. So first of all, it's knowing what job titles to look for. One of the sort of cheat codes I found just generally getting into sport was searching for partnerships specifically, because if you want to work in an account management or a business development role, there will be hundreds of easy apply business development job titles. If you're trying to find a job that is specifically focused on partnerships in sport or esports, or gaming more generally, use those search terms, because most people just aren't applying for those jobs. We've had similar conversations internally around recruitment. You will get more applicants if you use phrases like business development, sales development, or account management compared to partnerships manager, just because they're less popular search terms. So as an applicant, you'll find that the less competitive positions are the ones that use those sort of niche words: partnership specialist, partnerships manager, executive, those kind of things. So it's that sort of how things started for me. I applied for a few roles, not at any teams, to be fair, but sort of in and around esports, and I kind of realized that I was looking at things quite traditionally. I had to sort of pivot, and when I was interviewing at Excel, I was basically asked to present and pitch ideas, which is quite new to me. But I think that sort of shows where partnerships can take you. Obviously, you're acting on behalf of your brand partners, and taking what they do really well and bringing that in front of a gaming audience is a lot of fun. And I think, I spent an embarrassing amount of time on my presentation for it not to be very, very good. But yeah, I'd like to think I've got a bit better at that sort of thing now.
Awesome stuff. And like, what does your day to day look like? Because what I imagine it is just a series of calls and meetings all day.
Pretty much. I think you've caught me a good time. We've got some cool partners at Excel. I think working with brands that are really familiar in the space. We've worked with Andersey and HyperX really recently, and Beyond NRG, who people in the esports and gaming space are well aware of, and some brands that have come in completely left field, and in some cases has been their first foray into gaming. So JD Sports is an obvious one. BT, which is now, from a naming standpoint, transitioned to EE. It's the same company, obviously, but like bringing those brands into esports is pretty exciting. So I think as a team, they lean on us quite heavily to help develop their esports and gaming strategy. They know what they want to achieve, and in the UK, being gamers' first choice is incredibly valuable thing to achieve. And they lean on our sort of expertise in the field to deliver that. At the same time, that's how we get them into our world. Sometimes they want us to come into their world. We've just spent 3 of the last 5 weekends in fields across the UK and Ireland, activating at Parklife Festival, Longitude Music Festival, and Wireless Festival this weekend in London, basically bringing gaming into a mainstream audience with JD. So they have a big activation space at these festivals. We've brought gaming and some of our influencers and talent to those festivals, and just kind of blurring culture together. So we do all sorts of mad things. It is a lot of calls, and it's a lot of meetings and emails back and forth, but sometimes you are in a field just outside of Dublin playing FIFA.
Because I've been seeing those photos, and I'm like, these guys are just laying about and dancing about on the job. Like, so what was the kind of logic or the goals for taking some of your guys and putting them in those environments?
Yeah.
I was going to describe them more thoroughly than that, but I'll just say those environments.
Yeah. So I think with events specifically, what you do on the day is important, but you've also got to be creating content around those things, because if we take Wolfies, for example, he's got 2.5 million followers across all of his channels. We might be able to get a few hundred, maybe 1,000 or so people on the stand on the day. But if we're creating content around that that's reaching his huge audience, it's a bit of a no-brainer. So amplifying everything we do from an event standpoint is really important. But also, as I say with JD, it's all about blending culture together and staying culturally relevant. So being at music festivals is great, and you're present and active in front of that festival going audience. But by bringing gaming into it and using our influencers, you can also sort of show that you're bringing gaming into that mainstream environment. At the end of the day, our pros are young people who like going to music festivals. Some of them like going to music festivals. So giving them that opportunity and getting to show their audience what our partners do for them is quite a nice thing for us to do. So it came around quite quickly, but it's probably, I think, post-COVID, it's a great statement piece for Excel, especially following on from what we did at Insomnia, that events are really important for gaming. The social aspect of gaming is huge, and for partners like EE, Just Eat, and JD Sports specifically, that casual side of gaming is something they definitely want to activate around as much as the esports side. Whereas, the competitive side is interesting to them, but for other brands that are solely focused on performance, like Beyond, for example, that's performance is way more important to them than the casual side.
And as obviously, with like the new leadership that was brought into Excel like last year, I believe it was probably early mid 2021, there was a big switch in how Excel presented itself, probably internally and externally, as being like a British gaming, competitive gaming culture brand or something along those lines, which seems quite wishy-washy to me, but I'm sure there's a real like thesis behind that versus just saying like we're an esports team.
Yeah, I think we look at traditional sport and we can see that football teams, international teams, whatever you have, they'll stand for something, and that can be where they're from. We might serve the local people. If you're from Macclesfield Town Football Club, you stand for that local community. Esports doesn't have that intrinsic purpose. If you look at some of the teams that have blown up recently, they serve as maybe marketing models for the influencer that founded them. Koi is an example. They do amazing things, but it's just an extension of this influencer. Excel wants something to stand for and something to believe in, and I think something that people can relate to as well. Britishness is definitely an aspect of that. You'll have to speak to the senior leadership about the longer term vision behind that, but I think the power of better and the British aspect is super important to us. Britishness in entertainment travels really well. You look at James Bond, you look at Manchester United. These are British things that have traveled really well internationally. So if you do it the right way, you can definitely take that abroad. And again, from a partnership perspective, it reflects our partners. These are brands that are huge in the UK that are present internationally in cases, and we want to look at those things with them internationally. And yeah, the power of better sort of ties into that. It's not just a marketing tagline. It's a genuine ethos that we all buy into. And I think when you get onboarded, I've been in esports for just over a year now, and I think the transparency that having that kind of ethos brings is really important. It's not just, we want our teams to do better than they did last time. It's, we're very transparent. We're very open about how we optimize the way we work. We're always reviewing the way we work. We've just come off the back of, to say, 3 festivals. The last thing I want to do is do a report on what went well and what didn't go well. But that's the culture that we've got. And when the learnings that we'll take from that, and that working with JD closely in their world and from the activations they want to do, they're going to massively improve the activations that we do for our own brand. Like JD have been doing this for 30 years now. The fact that we can work alongside them on a huge activation in a couple of different places massively benefits us. So I'll be working away on that report for the rest of the week.
Well, I'm sorry to take up
that's
time. I'm sure you'd much rather be doing that than sitting down and speaking.
That's it.
I've got a question here where over the years I've asked it, and I've received like one of 2 answers. It's either really wishy-washy and like ethereal and conceptual, and some have like a very blunt definition for it. So like, what in your mind makes for an effective partnership? Within the context of esports, I should say. Obviously between team and whoever you partner with.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you always want to understand first of all what the brand wants to achieve, because brands inherently have different objectives. If we take headphones, for example, they're very active in esports. They care a lot about performance. They want to align with the best teams. You can think of brands that have become synonymous with winning teams, and that's always going to be the case. Some brands less interested in performance and are more interested in tapping into the audiences that you've created, the content that you produce, maybe the merchandise you make as well. There's all these different considerations. So the first thing you need to do is understand what a brand wants to achieve out of that partnership. And there are so many considerations there. I've named a few. There can be things like, some brands will not look at Counter-Strike because of some of the language that's used and the nature of it. Use terrorists and counter-terrorists.
Terrorist theme, yeah.
Exactly. You can't have an airline getting involved with Counter-Strike. They just won't look at it. So understanding what a brand wants to achieve is primary. I think second of all is understanding, how can you optimize what they're doing already and bring it into your world. There's a lot of brilliant marketers at these brands who perhaps just don't understand gaming, or perhaps they're doing something really well and they want to replicate it in gaming and they've acknowledged it, doing more of what they're doing already. If we use BT and EE as an example, what they've done with Hope United is a brilliant campaign. EXCEL can take that Hope United campaign that sort of focuses on tackling online hate. They worked solely with the home nation football teams because they've partnered with them for a long time. This year we brought them into esports and gaming, and they sat down with our FIFA players and discussed their perspective. For me, that's one of the best sort of things you can do. Take stuff that's already working and bring it to a gaming audience. And then I think the last thing would be to show them what gaming and esports is all about. I don't think we work with Fosty at EXCEL. I don't think I could have put Fosty in front of JD Sports straight away and expect them to get it. But over time, showing that people like this who create memes and that sort of light-hearted culture, we really don't take ourselves that seriously. I think is really fun. And when you get a brand that trusts you, we've been really lucky with the partners that we do have. That they give us a fair bit of freedom to have a bit of fun with things. Our whole campaign in spring was about how we'd finished 7th in the previous 2 splits. I think you have to be quite bold to take that to your partners and almost celebrate your previous underperformance, but with the right education and brands sort of trusting you, we can see the results from our playoffs campaign and the benefits that our partners had from it. We had these custom trainers done. I think it's a big success. So hopefully that's not the wishy-washy answer you're hoping for.
No, it's
fine. But yeah, those would be the sort of 3 main pillars that I think you really want to understand.
And almost like self-deprecation is obviously a very British trait within itself anyway. So I think if you're aiming to go that route, then that makes a lot of sense, Yeah, definitely. Literally my whole dynamic with my core friends who I've grown up with since I was 2 is just we meet each other and then we just diss each other the entire time effectively. Obviously very affectionately, but that is the entire dynamic, of course. If I can't, I don't know, take the piss out of somebody, then I don't know if I can consider them a friend. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think it's just very, very British.
Exactly. And it all comes down to that, knowing your audience. People know us, people know Caedrel and the jokes that come alongside that. It's almost an inside joke at this point. If you just were scrolling through our Twitter, you might not get it. If you're a part of our community, you're going to pick up on things, aren't you?
And being as you say, obviously being a British organisation and that way facing, how important is it to have a British audience versus tapping into the global audience? Because I'm sure you don't want to be alienating anyone, right? So yeah. And obviously, at that point, you're reducing the amount of eyeballs you can reach with a certain sort of effectiveness anyway, which is not good for partnerships. If you're saying we could reach this amount of people, if you're if you're niche in your brand voice and how you operate, then that's surely limiting for you.
Yeah, it's. I think we're fortunate at the moment that we have a lot of big British names on our books. So guys like Caedrel, Tom and Gorilla in FIFA, Wolfies.
You're only missing me, really. And
there we go. That's
the
Gauntlet. That's it. They're the big 5, exactly. So I mean that's that's been a conscious consideration in having those guys, that they do bring a British audience, but also we can bring our brand to a British audience like we did at Insomnia this year. So there are a number of ways to do it. The LEC has a pretty broad spread of audience across Europe and North America specifically. So yeah, it's really important to us in our partnerships. I think as well, generally speaking, the best orgs aren't dominated by their partnerships. I don't think we would ever make long-term important decisions just to satisfy the short-term needs of a partner. If we're going global, we want to make sure that we're delivering for JD on a global basis, for example. It doesn't mean we can't then still service some of our other partners on a smaller, on a more regional basis. But ultimately, we move with the business. I think it's a dangerous game to play when you're constantly chasing the needs of your partners or over promising. The best rights holders, actually across all sport, they create rights, they prove the value, and then they commercialize those rights. If you're making big promises and then you spend the following year, 2 years chasing and trying to create those, eventually you're going to get caught out. And that's not a spooky thing. That's just the nature of it. That is what Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes are. You sort of make these promises and then hopefully we can deliver it. Prove the value first, and then you can commercialize it based on facts and data. And I think that shows with EXCEL as well. I'd hope it does. You look at a lot of our partnerships; they've lasted a long time, and I think ultimately when you're dealing with brands, they're just trying to sort of prove what they're doing is good to the top of their businesses, and they can only do that through data. Sentiment only goes so far. Like their bosses want to know, what are we getting for our money? So we have to be very, very methodical in the way that we work.
That makes sense. And when are you going to partner with Microsoft and then activate around its spreadsheet software?
I mean, obviously we've tried. Obviously, I've sent the emails. They're not having it.
Because Microsoft's involved with like Cloud9 anyway, right? So we know that, and obviously they've got the whole gaming side of things there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I would love to do it for the memes, but just hasn't happened. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine there's thousands of good brands out there. We speak to lots of them, and sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's focus. We're coming out of a crazy time. Lots of great esports teams can prove that they're worth X amount on paper, but it doesn't mean that the brands value esports and gaming at that financial level yet. So it's a two-way street, and I think we're doing a good job at the moment of proving. Of providing an entry point to brands that want to get into esports, and that, as I say, that sort of data-driven approach really helps and aids that. But if a brand's not sort of ready to do something to make a big splash in the UK scene, fair enough. I would strongly suggest they do it. I think we'd have so much fun together. But maybe I'm not very good at my job, Adam. Maybe that's a problem.
Well, if that was the case, you wouldn't be on here, mate. So trust me on that one. You've got the stamp of approval there. But I've got like a running theory, which I've been like sitting on for probably a year and a half now. And I've slowly started speaking about it more. And I think you're one of the perfect people to run it by. So a lot of times people discuss or mention the esports audience. And I'm firmly in the camp of the esports audience does not exist. There is no such thing as an esports audience. Because if you look at Say you're a brand that's in Call of Duty and League of Legends, the audiences you're marketing to there can be very different. Like League of Legends, obviously very big in the East, very popular even among young people. So say there could be a 13-year-old Chinese girl who really loves League of Legends, and then you look at Call of Duty, it could be a 35-year-old war veteran who loves COD in America. You know what I mean? Like the very different demographics and how you appeal to those people are going to be very different. So while there will be some crossover of audiences, mainly where there are teams that compete in different games, I'd suggest. So you guys, for example, you've got your Valorant and League. There's a little crossover there because of Riot anyway, but you guys are like a thread that runs through both of those. So I can understand an EXCEL fan liking both games, whereas outside of the kind of link between teams, I think it's almost too basic to say there is an esports audience. Like you have to really segment it, right?
Correct. I think it's one of our biggest strengths is that you partner with an esports organization that's in a number of titles, and they can probably, I mean, Excel is a good example, can probably deliver for you to the audience that you want, because we can segment it like that.
Yeah.
We can heavily focus on Fortnite through who we have in Fortnite. Same with FIFA, same with Valorant, same with League of Legends. Even from a variety standpoint, we've got a good base of content creators now that we can segment that through. So kind of goes back to what we talked about before, where if you know as a brand what you're trying to achieve, partnering with the right esports organization that, like, we have expertise across all of those titles, and we can just plug you in to what works. We'll always encourage brands to activate across all of those titles, because, as you say, the crossover is so, I say so low, it's lower, it's not. You might watch English football and you might watch international football, the crossover there's pretty high. If you're watching League of Legends and you're watching Valorant, it's like surprisingly low. I think it's about 10%
Some
crossover,
but probably not a lot. Yeah.
No, exactly. So it certainly adds strings to our bow, because we can show that segmentation. We're not just saying, well, partner with Excel and there's going to be all this waste because you're not interested in all these audiences. We just activate around the channels that are most interesting to our partners.
It's like saying, oh yeah, we're going to target the music listening audience. Where it's like, yeah, some people that love Japanese jazz and there's some people that love Brazilian trap music. Like, very, very different audiences over the time. A small bit of overlap, but like, so you have to really drill down. And I think that it's becoming more spoken about now and understood. Like, I don't think I've pioneered this way of thinking by any means, but like, no one was really talking about it too much. So I remember he gave me a really good column title before when I wrote about it, like, esports fans don't exist. And everyone's like, wait, what the fuck's he on about? Like, I love esports. I'm a fan of esports. So I'm like, bang, I've hooked them in perfectly. But then that was my whole point. Like, I think we need to market and understand better, like, the different audiences,
Definitely. And, I think brands know that as well.
Yes.
No brand getting into esports now is the first to do it. Initially when I was seeing esports being pitched, it was get in now or you've missed it. It's not really the truth, and it's also it's too late. It's too late now to say you were the first to do it. So there was a big rush, as there was with the metaverse last year. There's a rush for brands to do it first, and now what we're seeing in esports is a far more measured approach. Okay, well, what does the esports audience mean? And likewise, we'll see. I'm sure we're going to see lots more amazing metaverse activations. But they'll be far more considered now than the initial, oh my God, we have to do this as a box ticking exercise. We need, like, it's not my main area of expertise, but we need to see a bit more longevity behind a few of those things that popped up in October last year and have just disappeared off the face of the earth. So esports audience is the same. There was that big rush because I think there was a lack of understanding. Now there's an increased understanding, and people are taking a lot more measured approach to, okay, but what does this stuff mean?
Well, as like a quick aside, actually, I was on Twitter earlier. I saw something like one of the Bored Ape Yacht Club like profile pictures sold in like October or November for like 400k, and then like it sold very recently again for like 51k in dollars. It was just like, you can quickly see how the value there was all speculative and almost non-existent, right? It was insane, but I saw that and I was like, most of us could have seen that coming. And those who didn't bought into it. So, but it is insane. And we will get onto the crypto stuff a little bit later on, because that is something that obviously is quite new, but there's enough time passed now where we can reflect on it a little bit. But as we were speaking about esports audience, I want to shift a little bit, I suppose. How important are the content creators and streamers and influencers to esports organizations? Because if you look at a Guild Esports, for example, like they went out upon launch and very quickly acquired like big creators, some of which you are no longer there, probably a year and a half later, which may be telling, who knows. And then said, like, we have X owned audience, which then they can say, look, we can put you in front of this many people that all love Guild, which isn't necessarily true. But it seems like it's very pivotal, and without content creators and influencers at this point, it may be hard to operate as an organization in the ways they are now.
Yeah, I think, we're in a fortunate position where we can use the LEC as a really good example. When you buy into streamers or whatever it is, you're often buying into a set number of, you could predict this is how many viewers we're going to get, this is how many hours they're going to stream for, and you can basically sell that. We're fortunate in the sense we have the LEC, which as a franchise league, we know how many games we're going to play, we know roughly the audience we're going to get. We've got something to measure against. For a lot of titles, I mean, look at Valorant last year. There was such little structure to it that it was hard to predict. Whereas with content creators, as we saw with Guild last year, it's very measurable. It's very predictable. So we've expanded into talent this year. I think there's a really nice story with the 3 content creators that we've got, with Cadrel being an ex-player, Leah, this being her sort of first foray into esports and wanting to learn more. And she's done some sort of like some co-streams and viewing parties for our Valorant games, and Rezex, who we picked up at Insomnia, which was a really nice story. So I think there's absolutely a place for it. We treat it very much as another roster because we've got something to base it against. I agree completely. It's not an owned audience. A lot of these people aren't Excel fans specifically. I would say with Cadrel, it was a huge pull for us, was that he's been an Excel player in the past. There's that awareness, and he's still a part of who we are. I mean, he's always been very nice to us on broadcast, so it made perfect sense to bring him in. But it's not always the case that that's owned audience. It comes down to the way that brands measure success. Putting a logo on a stream does have value, and brands recognize that. So I definitely think there's a place for it. I think it has to be done correctly. I think I think Guild have actually done a decent job with it, even if some of them aren't there, and maybe they'll have to look at different content creators. I also think it comes as esports orgs try to cater to, they've acknowledged that we can't use esports audience anymore. We now have, because brands are waking up, they're learning the difference between gaming and esports, which wasn't always the case. Brands were jumping into esports sponsorship thinking they were activating gaming when actually it was a smaller segment of gaming. Whereas through content creators, you still produce content like you always have done, except through content creators you can do it in casual games. And I think one of the best things you can do is be able to jump on releases like Elden Ring. When there's a new game that comes out, you can jump on that trend that you just can't really do through your pro players.
That makes sense. And to be fair, Guild aren't even really utilising the biggest influencer they've got, which they're paying $5 million a year for in David Beckham, So
that's naughty from you. That's naughty from you. That's
why?
Funny. That's that.
It's true though. He's not really popped up much at all. He's like Santa Claus at this point. Like once a year he'll show up for something, and that's about it. Which is a mighty shame. Is all I'm going to say. But also, I think there's maybe a lesson in that, in which you can't just basically rent access to an audience and think it's plug and play, and you're going to gain so much off of it. And of course, there's the accusations at the moment of them buying views and engagement and all that kind of stuff as well, which is a topic for another time. But obviously that does feed into their goals with revenue and those partnerships and stuff as well, right? I imagine.
Yeah, and it comes down to, again, what we talked about around being able to prove value. You've got to be able to prove your value. I think you can show brands, look at all these views we got you, look at this. But brands are tracking sentiment, awareness. In some cases, they're tracking sales against their sponsorships as well.
Yeah.
Brands will be saying, okay, well, we're not seeing the impact. We're not seeing this here. So you have to be pretty confident in what you're delivering. If you are buying views, you can absolutely make the case that actually this is a really localized way of, we can buy views. We can make sure all those views are in London, and that is a hyper-targeted thing for you. But not all teams are doing that. Sometimes you go and buy views where they're a lot cheaper to buy, and you get 250,000 views, and you got 30 likes next to it. And people go, is there actual value there? Make great content, you'll get the engagement. If you can spend money on it, that's absolutely fine. Compare the Meerkat was a pretty good campaign. They spent a lot of money on that and pushing that out across TV, but it was memorable. So there's a place for it if you do it right. I'm not saying Guild specifically. It's just some people prove points, right? yeah, so yeah, there's a place for it if it's done correctly, I think.
That makes sense. And I did not intend for this on my behalf, of course, to be like a guild roast session by any means. There's some good people over there,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I quite like their logo. Then we will leave it there. So as we mentioned at the top of recording, partnerships, the lifeblood of esports at this point, effectively, except for organizations where they have like other companies. So you look at Blitz for TSM and so on. There's not too many, but they're trying to build those like more and more talent agencies and such popping up under the same ownership of organizations, conflict of interest, whatever. No one cares. What do you see supplementing partnership revenue in the future? Because something else has to give at some point. I don't think you can just rely on the partnerships, because what if a recession hits and brands have to pull out, right?
Yeah. No, it happens. I think Excel will always be trying to look at how we can increase our revenues, as every good business does. I see some amazing, like, interesting models. I see NIP. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but my understanding is they've set something up where they consult traditional rights holders on how they can launch into esports. I think that's a brilliant idea. I see some other orgs where they sort of represent their own talent. So rather than being, sort of paying agencies to pick these guys up, they set themselves up as talent agencies. They might compete for them, but then if they want to do a brand deal, they'll then sort of broker that deal on behalf of their talent. And I think it works for some smaller creators. I'm not a talent agent, so I don't know the ins and outs of it. I'm sure some agencies would say that is awful. So I think there's loads of innovative ways of doing it. I think merchandise is always going to be an interesting one. Right. But it's we see it. It's hard. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do properly. It's really hard to do.
And
at scale.
They're not like leveraging the star power of influencers and players a lot of the time, though. When it comes to the merchandise, like using their image rights, putting logos on mouse mats and all that kind of stuff. The most personalized things we see as a rule are just like a jersey with a name on the back when a new player joins, or something along those lines. It seems like there's a long way to go on that front, but also is the problem with like supply and distribution and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely. Right? I think we should all give ourselves a bit of time, though, because a lot of orgs are not that long in the tooth, and ultimately these things take a long time. If a brand makes a big transition, 100 Thieves announced not long ago that they're going to be making their own game. That's incredibly bold. We might not, the short term sort of thoughts might be, well, that they're just going to not be an esports team. They're going to focus on that. They're going to focus on their merch and their hardware, which is great. But ultimately, we might look back in 10, 15 years and say they did both. So I think teams can sort of take a step back and go, like, give ourselves time, work out how things are going to go down. Who knows where we're going to be with play to earn gaming, and I think irrespective, I feel like we're edging towards a crypto conversation closer and closer, but
we are.
Who knows where we're going to be. It seems like it's here to stay, even if people are doing it poorly at the moment. Some people are, some people aren't. Maybe that's going to be the next area. I think talking about how to engage gamers, we're really good at it, but that creator and earning economy is something that maybe esports teams are going to really own, because they just get what gamers want. They get what brings gamers to come back. I remember seeing, I forget what the game was, but someone put a mechanic in there where you literally had a pickaxe and a rock for like an hour, and there was a reward at the end of it. It was a bit of an Easter egg.
Okay.
You've put it in the game, thinking that's the sort of thing that gamers will do, and they will just try because there might be a reward at the end of it.
That seems straight off of RuneScape, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing. It may have even been RuneScape, but those are the kind of things that I just think esports teams will know how to get gamers' attention for a long period of time, and I'm sure there'll be something monetizable off the back of it. But you got to do it the right way. Being first isn't always being best in esports, so we'll see what happens.
One revenue generating strategy I think is really good is what Ninjas and Pajamas are doing, according to Richard Lewis reports, in not giving sticker money over to players and keeping it for themselves. That seems very good right now, just completely scamming their players who they, who they trust and need on their side, or else they will not be winning anything, and they will have less people representing the brand. I think, just stealing off of them, that's probably a really good strategy. And then, of course, buying players for around $1 million like Device, and then not having them play for most of the year they're with you as well. Like, that's a very good strategy. But anyway, I don't know. I'm just taking shots at everyone now. But on while I'm on smoke, let's get into crypto a little bit. I know we're running. Well, somehow I've touched on barely anything versus what I've got written down, but we're a good 40 minutes in, so we will wrap up shortly. But with crypto, my main concern in the esports side of things is there are a lot of reputational hazards getting involved. So if you look at TSM, for example, taking $210 million over 10 years from FTX, that's a bit of a no-brainer for them, because like that's 210 mil. But that's providing that FTX manages to stay afloat for 10 years and everything goes well and they can fulfill the payments, of course, right? But with the naming sponsorship there, they're effectively co-signing that brand to the highest degree. They're saying FTX is as important to TSM, which is insane within itself. And of course, if it comes out in the future that FTX has done something untoward or something outside of the law, then the reputational, the stakes are very high reputationally, at least for TSM and such, right? And a lot of these organizations, you look at NIP, they've been doing digital jerseys, and Guild with $4.5 million from Bitstamp over 3 years, and Coinbase is everywhere. The list goes on with like these crypto deals. Crypto is not new within itself, but the hype around it very much is, and obviously some of the play to earn games stuff are new, and NFTs somewhat new as well. There's a huge risk involved in getting involved with an unregulated market with lots of money coming in and out, where in 6 months things can literally be dead. You know, I mean, they could be blossoming at one point and then just crash the next. So like, EXCEL doesn't have a crypto sponsor as far as I'm aware. Is that a conscious decision? And if so, why is that?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons, and there's higher ups at EXCEL that will be able to explain things in far more detail. I think there's plenty of merits to crypto. I'll be honest, I'm not personally involved in the scene, but I can see at a glance, things like fan tokens get hammered in esports, and I'm not sure it's just. I see fans in other sports paying 40 quid a year for a membership that expires at the end of however their seasons run. If you're a fan token holder, providing the utility behind that token is good. If Arsenal Football Club had a fan token that enabled you to buy tickets, get a pack every year, you get 10% off merch, and there was a finite number of those, instead of just charging fans 40 quid a year that runs out every year, those tokens would hold genuine value. And the more you have, eventually you've got 100, then you're a season ticket holder, whatever it may be, or you have the right to buy a season ticket. That's genuine utility. I think one of the big issues is teams aren't necessarily treating crypto as like an opportunity to empower their fans. They're taking it as a cash grab, which has the reputational damages, but I don't know the ins and outs of every team's or any team's contractual situations. But there's going to be clauses in there that give brands the opportunity to get out. So if you're signing 5, 10, 15-year deals, even shorter than that actually, there's a chance you're banking on that revenue that in some cases could just disappear because brands find a way to pull out. In some cases, I have a feeling that brands are being paid in the currency that company's promoting. So if the value of that drops as well, the reported value of that deal just isn't
your 1.5 million could actually be worth 300k or something like
that. Exactly. Yeah. So there's all sorts of risks attached. In terms of EXCEL, I think where we're so lucky here is we have people in the business who really do get it and are active in the scene, have probably been burned at some point with a program a project that hasn't gone their way, and they've learned from that. I think there's a genuine belief that when EXCEL enters that space, we'll do it in the right way. And equally, we have a responsibility to our partners that are big household names to make sure that we're doing things the right way. Not to mention our community, who also have that. In my opinion, the general esports community is against crypto. there's an educational piece to be done. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure anyone's really done it that well. So we're not in a
No.
hurry to do it. The crypto market's not in a good place right now either. If the right opportunity comes along, like we'd consider it. But Excel's not playing a short term game. We've grown sustainably, and I think that will reflect in our partnerships as well. So yeah, there's no like urgency to do it at the moment. You've also got to consider as well, and I think this is a really key point, is you have to be in titles that allow you to activate
Mm-hmm.
those things.
Yeah.
If you're working closely with Riot as we do in Valorant and League of Legends, we can't promote those categories like crypto, like betting even.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you actually delivering value for that partner if you're not in titles that enable you to do that? At the moment, Excel isn't in any titles that allow us to effectively market those partnerships. So whether it's crypto or whatever, I don't necessarily see the appeal for anyone to rush into something, because we would never start a roster just to just to fulfill a partnership. But it doesn't mean that others don't. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. We'll find out a lot more in the next few years, because there'll be more bad stories. I think there have been some good stories. I think 100 Thieves did an amazing NFT drop, just making it free. I think
The
there was
commemorative chain for
yeah
winning LCS regular
yeah
season, right?
exactly. I think there was all they've done there is they've got people to open an account who wouldn't have ordinarily opened an account,
Mm-hmm. And
and
it was hundreds of thousands of people, wasn't it?
I think it was about 300,000
Mm.
at the end of the 2 days. And I think at that point, there were only like 3 million NFT or account holders. I might have made that up, but I feel like there were only 3 million accounts on OpenSea, and 10% of them held this 100 Thieves commemorative chain, just because it was free. It was free. And it cost you nothing. It was good for the environment. Well, I say good for the environment.
Well,
It
it
was bad
wasn't
for the
as
environment.
detrimental as other NFT projects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they did a great job with that. I think they're going to prove value over time, and that's the right approach. So yeah, I think it would be foolish for any team to rule out doing it. We've got good reasons for not doing it at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really complicated one, probably one that I don't fully understand, just because I'm not really in the space personally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it's faith based still, right? So you have to take a pinch of salt with everything you hear from those who are really bullish and endorsing it. A lot of times they stand to make money themselves if the
That's
project's
it.
increasing value as well, as you say about pyramid schemes and stuff, right? So, one last thing, time wise, if that's good with you, which I think would be really valuable for people. So I mentioned at the top, but there's no like direct strict pipeline as far as I can see to get into the whole partnerships and account management space. So like how do you recommend doing so if someone was looking to get into esports partnerships? Like where would they at least start?
So I think if we look at the UK specifically, because that's all I really know from an
Mm-hmm.
employment standpoint. I think there's a number of different routes you can take. My personal route was to get the skills outside of gaming esports, where you can learn from such a broad range of people, and then
Mm-hmm.
transition in sort of from a passion standpoint. I think there are some brilliant agencies, some brilliant rights holders who can sort of teach you the ways, and that's based on 10 to 100 years of learning, and you can take that to esports almost as a not quite an expert, but you've got such a broad range of knowledge. Esports is evolving so quickly. There's not a lot of experts. That's not true. You not
There's a lot
necessarily
of self-proclaimed experts.
self-proclaimed. That's what I'm trying to get at. Is you can take a sort of separate viewpoint and apply it to
Mm-hmm.
esports, rather than coming all the way through and looking at everything through a narrowed lens.
For sure.
I don't think esports is ever going to take over as the world's most popular sport, but I also don't think it needs to, and I think that's just fine. So I think just having that separate viewpoint has really helped me. That being said, there are some great entry level programs. There's some great, some great orgs that are bringing people in. I think help out a grassroots org. I'd be reluctant to say that that's going to definitely lead to a job, because in the UK, partnerships is a tough one. There's probably 5 orgs that I know of that have a like recognized partnerships manager. You might have a head of
Okay.
partnerships or a head of commercial or commercial director, whatever it may be. But to have dedicated partnerships person is relatively limited at orgs. But there are, there's publications, there's events companies, so many opportunities there. So yeah, keep your eye out. I think attend events. I can't tell you how like partnerships people literally live for events. It's networking is central to our job. If you're present at events, you're almost it's almost impossible to miss you, if that makes sense. So you're going to bump into the people you want to bump into if you're at events. And I've also found as someone that's come into esports from elsewhere, when you make a bit of effort, and I mean like a little bit of effort, you just start getting invited to things, and that's it. It obviously feels great, but it massively helps who you know. It's not a huge industry, particularly as you know in East London. All the teams and a few of the sort of companies are based in East London now, so it's quite a close knit community there. If you can get yourself down to some events, it'll make a big difference.
For sure. For like, I think like journalism and partnerships are like two of the roles where like networking matters the most.
Yeah.
And networking is a common theme in terms of advice across all of these episodes, effectively, which almost makes it sound redundant, but I think actually highlights just how important it is, no matter where you are, and especially in an industry like this, where if I don't know how to get in touch with somebody, I'm probably one or two people removed from being able to get that contact. And
Exactly.
I'm not that outgoing with networking and stuff these days because I'm old and complacent. But
yeah, and I think
the youngins out there can do it.
Absolutely. And if they're already at this, I mean, if they've got 50 minutes into this, fair play to them. I would say if you've if you've already acknowledged that you want to get into esports, there's a decent chance that you're already in a Discord community that, as you say, knows someone who knows someone. There are so many events that people are present at. As I say, I came into it from outside the industry, just moving to EXCEL and meeting people who were doing this for free when it wasn't as organized as it is now.
Yeah.
Those people have genuinely like worked wonders for not only for like my career, but also for the way that we operate partnerships at EXCEL. Like brought me into the right people and introduced me to some like really exciting conversations. So yeah, like it's a huge thing to focus on.
Awesome stuff. And in favour of time, though, I have 15 more things I want to get into, maybe a sequel, if I can afford your rates again in the future. We'll wrap it up there. Your Twitter will be in the description. Did you want your LinkedIn in there? Is that where you do
whatever,
professional
mate?
stuff? It doesn't really matter.
Whatever. Yeah, don't mind. I'll connect with you.
I'll put your Twitter and your OnlyFans in the YouTube description. And thank you very much for taking the time, mate. I appreciate it. And for everyone watching and listening at home, we're on all the major audio platforms as well as YouTube. Another episode of Make Your Mark done. I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.